On today's show, the Chicago Bulls are entering full rebuild mode after trading Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey and helping to facilitate a DeMar DeRozan trade. The question is, why did it take so long? And what's next for Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, as well as the Bulls' new young core? And is Billy Donovan the coach of the future still in Chicago? It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. I love them so much, I never really want them to stop, right? But as you got playoffs winding down and then you get fewer and fewer games and maybe the sports just aren't sportsing the way you want them to, look, FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want all summer long. All you have to do is open the app and dream up big bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Right now, you can head over to FanDuel.com and take a look at the outright betting favorites to win the title next NBA season. The Boston Celtics plus 300 to repeat, the OKC Thunder right behind them at plus 750, and then the Denver Nuggets not so far off in distant third place at plus 850. So for all those odds and so much more, head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Bulls and Locked On NBA, Pat the Designer, who can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Bulls. All right, Pat, it's been a busy little stretch here for the Chicago Bulls. I need you to help us kind of make sense of some of the moves that we're seeing or the moves that we're not seeing being made by the Bulls front office here. So let's start. DeMar DeRozan, he's gone. Alex Caruso, gone. They get back Josh Giddey in the Alex Caruso trade. DeMar DeRozan, they get a couple seconds for being willing to participate in this sign and trade deal alongside the San Antonio Spurs and the Sacramento Kings. Let's kind of start right there. Let's start with the Caruso Giddey one. Why a straight swap for Alex Caruso, and why was Josh Giddey the best that they could get for Alex Caruso?
Well, I think I've looked at this offseason in a twofold way, right? In one area, right, when you look at the Josh Giddey trade, why would you go one for one? Well, you're in a bad situation. Alex Caruso in the last year of his deal on a team that basically, he's probably not going to re-sign with, not because he doesn't want to be here, but at 30 years old, he probably wants to go out and compete. You would assume that he's like, listen, I've given you guys like 4 years of my life, and we haven't competed for anything except the play-in game, and we haven't won one of those yet. So more than likely, I want to go compete for something. So you've got that risk on one side. On the other side of it, right, you're looking to make a trade for a guy who you missed out on an opportunity with. There was real offers on the table for Alex Caruso at the trade deadline where the Bulls could have gotten multiple first-round picks, multiple opportunities to go out there and add to the future of their team's draft capital and assets, stuff like that, and they missed that window. So the reason that you get back just Josh Giddey is because you backed yourself into a wall. You put yourself in a position where basically it's like, listen, guys, we have to get something back, and we know this guy's probably not going to be here. He may be here next year, but for the foreseeable future, we know that Alex Caruso is probably a player who's not going to be here. Yes, you could take him into the season, but you're trying to start this youth movement thing here, and it helps if I swap a 30-year-old player for a 21-year-old player. And the reason why Josh Giddey, I think you look at those first 35 games with Lonzo Ball, and you kind of look at the system that Billy Donovan wants to run and where he's seen success with this Bulls team running, where he's seen success his entire career running a system. And then you look at the last 3 years of Bulls teams where you go, okay, who's the point guard? We've had I would assume we'll swap in for Lonzo Ball, who basically went down. That kind of worked for like the first season, but he was never the point guard that Lonzo was. You had Patrick Beverley come in for 14 games. That's the best that you've had to this point. Ayo Dosunmu kind of had his fall off the second year, a bit of a sophomore slump. You threw Kobe White in there, and he's more of a combo guard than he is a point guard. Yes, he can play the position, but he's more of a scorer than he is anything else. And so that point guard is so essential to Billy. So the reason why Josh Giddey, I think you bring him in because I know the down season, I know he was horrible in the playoffs. I know there's a lot of negatives on Josh Giddey, but people forget that this guy, when he had the ball in his hands, was a 16, 7, and 8 type of player on a consistent basis. And Oklahoma City, rightfully so, said, we're taking the ball out of your hands. We're putting it in Shea's hands. And you're now the shooting guard. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you've seen Josh Giddey's shooting percentages, but there's one thing that he can't do: shoot. That doesn't mean that he can't still be a solid point guard for an NBA team. And I think that's what the Bulls are hoping for here.
And then the other side of it, obviously, DeMar DeRozan gets dealt. Now, that's more of maybe, they do him a favor, right? They're helping him out, setting him up with a future team. He is probably along similar lines, right, with Caruso. He wants to get to a winning situation, change of scenery, all that. So they do get back, a couple seconds, some cash for facilitating that sign trade. What I'm so curious about is, why did it feel like it took until now, until this offseason? You talked about missing the window at the deadline with Alex Caruso, missing out on, future draft capital, better deals they probably could have had on the table at this past trade deadline. Why until now to kind of, I guess, fully enter what is like a full rebuild if you're Chicago?
Well, listen, as much as it pains the modern NBA and it pains modern NBA fans and it pains me as a Bulls fan as well, because I hate seeing my team lose, AK is going to take his time, and it's too much time. And I do agree that he missed the window. But he's somebody who believes, if I'm building a team, I'm going to see this team through. And we saw that through in how things have been done in Denver, right? How many times we talked about moving on from Jamal Murray? They didn't end up doing it. It ends up working out for him in the long run, because all of a sudden Jamal Murray comes back. He's healthy. He helps lead them to a championship. Him and Nikola Jokic are, the players that everybody hoped that they were going to be. Jokic was the whole time. Murray coming back, being healthy, was finally able to contribute to that. And I think that that's the mindset that AK has. And I think that's why, right, the frustration that a lot of Bulls fans show, I understand it, because they moved way too slow with all of this. But that's really what he was brought up in. That's how kind of he went through his GMing life, right? They took their time. When you look at Denver, Denver hasn't been a sub 30 win team since 2000 and I believe 2, because they got Carmelo Anthony the next season in that draft. So you're talking about a team that basically was like, we don't tank here. We're going to compete every year. And we've seen that. We've watched Denver teams that were like, they're not going to win anything, but they're probably going to win like 30, 40 games, and there'll be a fun watch here and there. But
like 10th through like,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
How many Denver teams have we watched that way? And I think that's really how AK and Mark Eversley are building the Chicago Bulls team. Do I like it? Am I in favor in it? I don't like it because of the results we've seen and because you missed real opportunities. And I think that's the part that sticks out in most Bulls fans' faces. When you look at the Zach LaVine trade that didn't happen, now you can't move him. There were multiple first-round picks on the table. RJ Barrett was on the table, right? For other players who were out there, who I believe Emmanuel Quickly, before he got moved, was also on the table. So like there were players out there that could have helped your team now where you wouldn't be in this position. And I think that's where a lot of when you look at AK, you're like, you're moving way too slow here. But in his mind, he's like, I'm going to make sure that we don't Larry Markkinen this again. We're not going to trade somebody away who's then going to go out there and put up 25 points again.
And these are kind of the two remaining dominoes, right? So you still got Zach LaVine in Chicago. You've also got Nikola Vucevic, right? Both guys, clearly on the trading block if you can get something for them. It looks like at this point for Zach LaVine, though, he's widely being regarded as one of the worst contracts in the NBA. So much so to the point that Chicago might have to attach an asset to actually offload that contract. So when you're looking at the future for those two guys, are there any rumors around Vucevic, teams that have been linked to interest with him? And then for Zach LaVine, I mean, are the Bulls just going to have to ride out the duration of that contract?
The Vooch one, I wonder if they're trying to push Vooch as heavy right now. I think they're very focused on moving Zach LaVine. I think Vooch's name is being brought up in certain conversations, but we've heard that the Zach LaVine is the focus. They've called over 15 teams about Zach LaVine. We got that report from Adrian Wojnarowski that the Bulls are heavily trying to move Zach. I don't know if they're trying to move Vooch as much, because I think there's some teams that could benefit from Vooch that would actually want Nikola Vucevic back in a trade, and I don't think the Bulls are that much in a hurry to move on from him. I think Vooch is a player who, and we know how the NBA goes, right? If you hold on to Vooch heading into the season and by the NBA trade deadline, a team is looking around going, my God, we could really use a guy that can be a consistent double-double and give me consistency on the rebounding tip and be solid in the post. We see that every season. Vooch is a piece that you can move. I think you're not as worried about him. The Zach LaVine. Go ahead.
I see the Vooch thing, and I keep coming back to the Pelicans. I'm like, how are the Pelicans going to get Vucevic, right? Because like that's the one that's screaming like.
Yeah, I saw something today where and I don't even want to put it out there as a report. It was literally like speculation, I think, but the Pelicans were the name that came up, and I was like, okay, how does it get done though? And it was kind of like you've got two sides of guys who are basically like, we're both done. Where they have Brandon Ingram, the Bulls have Nikola Vucevic. I was like, all right, I'll take it. Like, that's a win for the Bulls, if anything. But I would be very surprised if we see anything done Pelicans-wise that included something major like a Brandon Ingram. And I think the tough part about it is as well, right? You have to have something where contracts are going to be able to line up and you're going to have, because the Bulls right now, basically can only, they have about $10 million worth of room that they can take back a contract right now. Now trading Vooch would add to that and help with that. But there's not a lot of space for the Bulls. And I don't know if you've seen the Bulls history, but they do not like paying the luxury tax. So I'd be very excited if a Pelicans trade went down, because I think the Pelicans have a lot of good assets that they could send back to the Bulls. But I'm skeptically excited, as I'll say, right? DeMar DeRozan trade was supposed to net us somebody like Kevin Huerter, and we got Chris Duarte. Those are very different players.
All right, and last thing I got for you here, Pat. Obviously, with the new this new direction for the Bulls, the way they're headed, the youth movement, right? So obviously you got young exciting players like Kobe White. You got Ayo. You've got just drafted Matas Buzelis, right? So young exciting core talent. Obviously Josh Giddey coming back in the Caruso trade. Is Billy Donovan the right guy to lead this rebuild, kind of like to be, I guess, the first coach for a lot of these young guys, or to kind of usher in this new age of Bulls basketball? Or do you think we could see a coaching change on the horizon as they're headed in this new direction?
And listen, I don't know if a coaching change is coming, but I don't know if that's the same answer to the question, right? Like, I don't know if we'll see Billy Donovan end up getting moved out by the end of this season because the Bulls are very much they're a loyal team, and if you go out there and you give them their all, we've seen they'll show the loyalty right back and say, we'll ride this out with you, we'll roll with you. Billy Donovan hasn't done the worst job of all time, contrary to what some Bulls fans do believe, but as far as him being the right coach for this team, I think he's finally getting the right team that fits the style of coach that he is. And I think that's the most important part of this, where you look at Billy's time in OKC. Yeah, there were stars there, but one thing that Billy Donovan always had was that point guard he could rely on. We see what kind of team he wanted to build when it started off here. 35 games in, Lonzo Ball messes up his knee, never comes back, right? And the Bulls never addressed that. To me, that's a front office problem. You never address trying to replace Lonzo at all, because you're like, he'll be back. We're waiting on it. He'll be back eventually.
We're still waiting on it.
We're still waiting on it. Yeah, I mean, like I always think about the Lonzo Ball video, and somebody put like the like they made it like the end of an old Black BET movie where it's like, I'm back, baby, I'm coming back. Don't worry about it. He stands up in the chair and they put the music over it. Oh, I'm hopeful. It's like Lonzo Ball, in fact, did not come back. He has not played a game since this video was recorded. Like, that's really kind of how I feel about it. But I think the big thing is now you're getting Billy Donovan with a team young, wants to run, wants to be a running gun type of team as far as taking the ball off of the boards. Josh Giddey's going to be able to push the basketball ahead. I think that there's a lot of things that fit the style of coach that Billy Donovan is, and unfortunately, Billy Donovan's not a Pat Riley. He's not an Eric Spoelstra. He's not a Greg Popovich, where no matter what team you give him, he can coach that team to beat you with his team, right? He's the kind of coach that, and it's shown here in Chicago, you got to give him the style of team that works for him, or it's not going to work for him. And I think that now that you're going with this youth movement, you've seen Kobe take a step. You're seeing, right, a point guard, a real point guard come in, and Josh Giddey. Ayo now kind of takes on that Alex Caruso role. You bring in Jalen Smith. You go out and get Matas Buzelis. These are all guys that run. These are all guys that are willing to take it off the break and say, hey, we got to get out. We got to go. The Bulls were 28th in pace last season. I think that, and probably post-Vooch trade, right? I think Vooch hurts the pace a little bit, but post-Vooch trade, you'll probably see that pace jump up a nice amount, because Billy Donovan wants his teams to run. I think that, is he the right coach for this team? It's finally a team that fits him. So if you see Kobe White take that step, it may be the case that he is the right coach for this team. That still doesn't mean it'll lead to a championship. He had 4, 5. How many superstars do you have out there? 5?
A lot.
I mean, if we take Chris Paul into account, are we saying six superstars in his time in OKC? And he didn't win a championship, but he might get this team to a point where we sit here and look at him and go, oh, they're a good basketball team.
Will we see a Zach LaVine or a Nikola Vucevic trade ahead of the season? How will this Bulls new upstart, exciting young core look once the season starts? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Bulls. Pat, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Appreciate you having me, Jackson.